Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you are doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, we are going to continue our look at horror-themed games for the month of October. And in this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the Call of Cthulhu RPG, the starter set, along with some of the solo adventure supplements. So when I did my big introduction to solo role-playing video, some people asked me about non-fantasy role-playing tools and systems and things for solo role-playing. The reason that I focused more on fantasy in that video is probably for two reasons. One, that's just what I like the most, so it just made sense for me to focus on that because that's also most of the things I have for solo role-playing are fantasy-based. And two, there just seems to be an abundance of material for solo role-playing in a fantasy setting. There just seems to be the most stuff for fantasy-style games. But I thought since this was October and we were looking at horror games this month, then it would be a perfect opportunity to talk about Call of Cthulhu as a solo role-playing game. So my experience with the Call of Cthulhu RPG is very, very limited. I played a short campaign way back in the early 90s with some friends, and I played a one-off game about 12 years ago. And that is really my only experience with the Call of Cthulhu RPG. And that is a little odd, seeing as how much I love mythos fiction and all kinds of mythos board games and books and all of that kind of stuff. It's just for my group of friends who I played role-playing games with, we just were never drawn to Call of Cthulhu for some reason. Nobody had it, so it wasn't really on our radar. But I've been wanting to get more into it, back into it, explore it more, and so I thought this would be a perfect opportunity. So in my keyword system for role-playing, for solo role-playing, I talk about systems, and these are all-in-one games made for solo play. And the Call of Cthulhu starter set is a great system for solo role-playing because it comes with the rules you need. And it comes with an introductory solo adventure that is basically an advanced fighting fantasy, an advanced choose your own adventure book that walks you through the steps of learning the rules. And it's a pretty cool little story as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But let's read a little bit about Call of Cthulhu here on the back of the starter set, the new starter set for 7th edition. One thing I do want to say is that the Call of Cthulhu RPG is one of the most customer-friendly products I know of. And there's two reasons for that. One is even though this is 7th edition, it is backwards compatible with everything Chaosium has ever released for Call of Cthulhu, with only needing maybe a few little minor tweaks to make stuff that's decades old work. That is so fantastic. That is so forward thinking. That's putting the customer first, because when they release a new edition, you don't need to rebuy all your stuff. You don't need to spend days converting stats, days converting rules. Everything just works with minimal effort. That is awesome. The second reason why I think it's very consumer-focused, customer-focused, is when you buy the physical products from the Chaosium website, you get a free PDF of that product with every purchase. And again, very cool, because a lot of the Call of Cthulhu supplements and source books and manuals and stuff, they come with handouts. And so it's really handy to have those PDFs on your computer so you can print the handouts when you need them. But let's take a look at the back of the box here. A world of mystery, horror, and adventure in a box. This starter set contains everything you need to start playing Call of Cthulhu, the tabletop role-playing game of mystery and horror. Inside this box, we can actually take a look at this little larger sheet here for inside this box. You get 3 books. You get book 1 is Alone Against the Flame, and this is a solo introductory adventure which teaches you the basics of Call of Cthulhu as you play through the mystery. You get book 2, which is the starter rules, everything you need to get started playing games of mystery and horror. They are very basic rules. I wish there were a little more to them, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Book 3 is the Paper Chase and Other Adventures. You get 3 starter scenarios, and those are not specifically made for solo. And I know they're not made for solo, but I don't know how easy they are tweakable to be made solo. So we'll have to kind of investigate that as we look more at the Call of Cthulhu RPG in the coming videos. You get some ready-made investigators, you get some blank investigator sheets, you get your dice, and you get some player handouts for those scenarios for those modules. So a very, very cool box set that just comes with everything you need. So I would say that this box set is a complete system because you do get this book 1, Alone Against the Flames, which is a solo adventure that you can play. You could probably play through it 2 or 3 times before you see everything. So I think that would give you probably about 8 or so hours of play just in this one book. I would say that this is more on the complex side of the systems that we've looked at so far. Call of Cthulhu is not a super complex game, but it is more complex than something like White Box, I think. It is more complex than something like Scarlet Heroes or 4 Against Darkness. But it's not overly complex. It's pretty easy to learn. And most of everything you do is going to be done with percentile dice. The focus in solo play for Call of Cthulhu is on scripted adventures, is on those choose a path, choose a paragraph adventures. So if you're looking for something a little more sandbox orientated, Call of Cthulhu may not be for you. I am hoping to discover more ways to play Call of Cthulhu in a more open and more sandbox environment. If you know of tools that you can overlay on Call of Cthulhu to make it more like that, please let me know. I do have a feeling that there is a supplement that is called Pulp Cthulhu, and I need to buy that. So Pulp Cthulhu, it's a two-fisted action adventure against the mythos. So one thing that I've talked about a couple times in some videos when I've looked at some of the Arkham File board games from Fantasy Flight and that kind of thing is usually what I would argue that when people think of playing games in a Call of Cthulhu, in a Lovecraftian world, while they may be thinking of the ideas started by Lovecraft, in terms of tone, people are more often thinking of the writings of Brian Lumley, because Brian Lumley kind of took the Lovecraftian ideas and made them a little more pulpy, made them a little more adventurous, made them a little more action-packed, like a lot of the board games that we play, like Arkham Horror or Eldritch Horror or Mansions of Madness. So if you are looking for something down that path, I think the Pulp Cthulhu supplement is something that you will really want to look into. And this is definitely something that I am going to be purchasing soon, because I think that a more adventurous, a more action-packed game of Call of Cthulhu will be more appropriate for solo role-playing. It's really hard to create a mystery that you have to solve in a solo environment, because it's hard to come up with that mystery and then blank your mind out and then having to solve that mystery, right? So having something that's a little more kind of in your face, a little more action orientated might be better suited for solo Call of Cthulhu. So I think this is a must purchase for people wanting to get into that. And a couple other books I just wanted to show real quick. If you want to read a little bit more about the Cthulhu mythos, but you don't want to, maybe you want to expand past H.P. Lovecraft. Again, Brian Lumley, highly recommend the Titus Crow books. You can get those in newer editions. You don't have to get these vintage DAW editions. But the Cthulhu, the Mythos and Kindred Stories by Robert E. Howard, of course, creator of Conan. This is a fantastic collection of mythos stories from Howard. Very, very good. And then, of course, August Derleth. August Derleth really did a lot to kind of popularize Lovecraft in a bigger circles outside of just people who were reading weird tales, and outside of people who were just into weird fiction. A lot of the popularity of the Lovecraft circle of authors is owed to August Derleth. And I know people go back and forth with how, if they like August Derleth or they don't like. But his book, The Mask of Cthulhu, I think is pretty good. That's got some good stories in it. And then, of course, any of the books published by Chaosium. And right now in October, Chaosium is having a sale on some of their printed books on their website. So maybe go check that out. They do have a Weird West collection that I am going to buy. But if you wanted to get kind of a good rounded view of Cthulhu and what that dude is all about, the Cthulhu Cycle is a great book. And the nice thing about these Chaosium collections of short stories is you will get exposed to a number of different authors. So you will be exposed to a number of different styles and different ways to approach the mythos. And in this particular novel or this particular collection, you're going to get stories by Lord Dunsany. So, of course, Lord Dunsany, he wrote like way before the Cthulhu the Cthulhu mythos was created, but he was a huge influence on Lovecraft. And I have reviewed the Gods of Pagana on the Dungeon Dive before, and Robert M. Price, I believe it's Price, wrote the introduction. Was it Price? Yeah, so Robert M. Price edits a lot of these Chaosium collections, and he talks a little bit about Dunsany's influence on H.P. Lovecraft there. But you'll get a story by Dunsany, by M.R. James. You'll get The Call of Cthulhu, so definitely want to read that. You'll get stories by August Derleth, Alan Dean Foster, C.J. Henderson, David C. Smith, Leonard Carpenter, Will Murray, Donald R. Burleson, Will Murray, Steve Polson, and Pierre Comtois. And then also this collection here is Strangers of Strange Songs, which is a collection that celebrates the fiction of Brian Lumley. And so a little more pulp-orientated, a little more action-orientated here. And in this collection, you will have some stories by Brian Lumley, some stories by Don Diamasa, Robert L. Burleson, Benjamin Adams, Tina L. Jens, James Robert Smith, John Tins, Louis H. Gresh. I believe Louis H. Gresh has a new collection out on Chaosium that I want to check out. Gregory Nickel, Benjamin Adams, and James Robert Smith, C.J. Henderson, Stephen Mark Rainey, and again, Brian Lumley. So a pretty cool collection there. And really any of the Chaosium collections are going to be good choices to kind of like get into the Cthulhu mythos. So the first book here is book 1, Alone Against the Flames. And this is going to be your main book that you're going to be starting your Cthulhu trip with. And this book is going to outline some of just a brief overview of the game system, how it works, an example of play. Very basic for this is a good introduction to role-playing, even if you've never played a role-playing game before. I think this could be a good first step for you. It walks you through the process very distinctly, with good instructions. And then you start your adventure, and the main focus of this adventure is in creating a character. So the character sheets for Call of Cthulhu can look very intimidating, but don't let that put you off, because the main part of the character sheet, this big section here, is really just a detail of all of your skills. And this section here is why I think that Call of Cthulhu could be a very good game for the solo role player, because it's very mechanically, it's focused on the mechanisms. It is a very mechanical RPG. Rarely do you have to think about how you are going to overcome something. You will be faced with a challenge, and then you will look at the skill that coincides to that challenge, and you will roll a percentile die, and you need to roll your skill or under in order to solve that challenge. So it's very easy to come up with situations. You have all kinds of different skills like accounting, anthropology, charm, climb, your credit rating, dodging, driving an automobile, fighting with your hands, fighting with a knife, fighting with firearms, first aid, law, library use, listening, locksmith, mechanical repair, the natural world, navigate, persuade, psychology, sleight of hand, spot hidden. I recommend taking spot hidden when you are playing through this. That skill came up a lot. But so it's very easy to see what you need to do to overcome something and roll your dice. So, for instance, if you needed to spot something that was hidden, my character has a 70% chance to do that. So I would just roll the die, and then I got a 63. So I would have spot whatever was hidden. You also have your basic stats, which are like strength, constitution, dexterity, intelligence, size, mental power, appearance, and education. One of the things that this game does is you have your basic stat and your basic score in your skills, and then it has a concept of having that and fifthing that. The reason you do that is for a hard test, you will test at half of your skill or stat. And then on an impossible test, you will test at a fifth of your skill or stat. So very easy. It gives you your rolls. It gives you your target numbers. You never really have to think about what your target number is. So I think the system, as far as the mechanics go, lend themselves well to solo role playing. One other mechanism that you might encounter is if your character is really good at something, or if the situation allows for it, you may be given a bonus. And when you are granted a bonus, you will roll 2 of the tens dice, and then you will choose the lowest. If you're at a disadvantage, you will roll 2, and then you will take the highest. So that's how you can determine whether you're at an advantage or a disadvantage. So my character's name here was Stuart Chappell. I said that he was born in Castle Rock. He is a journalist who also works at a library. And this is the portrait I drew of him. So I took a bundle of skills for my journalist. I have photography. I have fighting and brawling. He's kind of a bigger guy. He's kind of like a Clark Kent style journalist. He sometimes he gets a little pushy, and he's always curious. But and then I have I know English. I know how to navigate. I'm good at tracking. I have a pretty low stealth. I'm big, but I'm also can be a little bit quiet when I need to. I can spot hidden, and I have a psychology of 50% there. And then my character, some backstory here. My personal description is I'm an easygoing bigger guy. I'm always curious and always down to do something new. I believe that the more I learn, the better I will be. I have 2 significant people, or 2 students. So I work at the Castle Rock University Library, and I'm also a journalist. But I have 2 students who I've kind of tutored before, and that is Billy Pepper and Joan Boyer. My treasured possession is a Kodak Anastigmat camera, an old camera from the 1920s, because this game does take place in the 1920s. I am claustrophobic. Right now, my possessions are a lantern, an old flashlight, and a pad of paper and a pencil. So that's kind of like what I'm taking around with me. I probably won't be carrying a lantern around. But this character was mainly built while playing this adventure. And while playing this adventure, you will be reading through paragraphs and making choices. It will walk you through some of the rules. There is a little problem, though. In my adventure, I never got into combat. So I haven't learned the combat rules yet. It's very easy to learn. You can just go to book 2. Book 2 are your basic rules. And like I said, they are very basic. You're only looking at 23 pages of rules here, which are going to give you enough to play the other solo supplements, which we will be taking a look at in just a minute. But the rules for combat are in here. Combat is pretty easy. The rules for different types of stat checks, such as contested checks, where you're comparing one roll against another. You get most of the rules are going to be in here. One set of rules that are not in the basic rules are the rules for wealth, such as your spending level, your cash, and your assets. So that is one thing that you're going to have to, if you want to continue, if you want to make a campaign for your solo character, then you are going to want to invest in the Keeper book, in the main Game Master Guide, in order to get all of the rules. So I definitely want to invest in that as well, because I think I'm going to keep with this game over the coming years. One interesting thing about Call of Cthulhu is the way that money works. You kind of always have a certain amount of money for things you need. And if you need more, then you make a skill check, and you kind of figure out like that. It's a neat way to keep track of money. But this walks you through kind of coming up with your backstory, and then you get into your game system, which is your difficulty rolls, your skill roll, and difficulty levels, your opposed skill rolls, your luck rolls. So you do have a luck stat, and at certain times you will need to roll your luck. So one rule that is not in the basic rules is to spend your luck as a currency to turn failed rolls into successes. And you can spend at a 1-to-1 basis. So I have a luck of 60. Let's say I was trying to make a spot hidden roll and I rolled a 75. I could spend 5 points of my luck to lower my roll by 5 points to make it a success. So that's a pretty easy way to turn luck into a currency. And then you get a little bit about how you're going to handle your sanity. And here's your combat. You have close combat and firearm and range combat, different fighting maneuvers, how you figure out dodging and attacking and all that kind of stuff. You have different forms of damage here. So it's not a super complex system, but it's not a super easy system either. It's kind of right in the middle. I just consider it more complex than things that we have looked at already. But overall, I enjoyed my time playing this adventure. I think the writing is pretty good. It's not bad at all. It's some of the better writing. I would put it up there with, one of the better kind of maybe fighting fantasy books or lone wolf books. It creates a really strong sense of place, and I think that is an important feature for a Call of Cthulhu game to have. You really want to feel that you are in these small towns on the East Coast in the 1920s, around creepy people and weird buildings and mysterious circumstances. And this adventure provided all of that to me. It took me about 2.5 hours to get to one ending, but I know there are a number of things that I didn't see. And so I can play this again, definitely. But I really did enjoy my time with this adventure. I think it did a pretty good job of explaining the rules that I needed to play. There are things I had to look up again because I'd never found them in here. But I wouldn't say that is a huge complaint just because the introductory rules are so simple. But then you also get here book 3, which is your Paper Chase and Other Adventures. So this is a reprint of 3 popular adventures: Paper Chase, Edge of Darkness, and Dead Man Stomp. And these are all kind of updated for whatever small, minute changes might have happened in the 7th edition. Again, I cannot vouch at all for how you would play these solo. I'm sure people have, and I'm sure you could read it and come up with some ideas, at least to some seeds to plant, to grow some adventures, to get you started on a more sandbox-orientated solo game of Call of Cthulhu. You also get some pre-made character sheets here. So you will get Jesse Williams, a history student. You will get Keiko Kane, a science student. Lois Russo, an engineering student. Nevada Jones, an archaeology professor. And also Wentworth Avebury, a languages professor. And you'll get some blank character sheets there. And then a whole bunch of different handouts that correspond to the different scenarios in book 3 there. So you get like a letter here. There's a couple letters, actually a lot of letters. brutal murders at the docks, some newspaper prints. See, some of this stuff is really fun, and I'm hoping there are ways to incorporate stuff like this in our solo games of Call of Cthulhu. These maps are really cool. Those maps could definitely be used for some kind of solo play there. Small's Paradise, the old garage, Trinity Cemetery. This is a great map of Harlem in 1925. That could definitely come in handy. And here's just a picture of the Keeper's Rulebook that I do need to order. The cool thing about a lot of these supplements for Call of Cthulhu is they all come with a lot of like really just fun things to read about. You know, the world, the mythos is so large and so detailed and so complex that it's always fun to learn about it. And speaking of that, I did want to mention one thing, and I really liked the way that they handled this. Very simple, and it was totally my philosophy too. You know, right in the beginning, they do give you a little bit of a background on the mythos, and they briefly mention, okay, yes, H.P. Lovecraft had some problematic qualities. He was incredibly racist. However, we can still have fun playing in the worlds that he created, and we don't need to, we don't need to specifically believe the same things he believed in order to take advantage of the things he created. And that is my philosophy with older authors as well. Take the good, acknowledge the bad, and have fun. You know, we don't need to jettison everything just because somebody maybe had some problematic qualities in their life, especially with older authors, because just the times were different. But Lovecraft was also kind of even racist for his time. But yeah, I like that. I like that this book acknowledges that and just says, hey, let's take the good and have fun with the good. But then we also have these. Now, these don't come with the starter set. These are additional purchases, and there are, I think, 2 or 3 more that I don't have. And these are larger scripted solo adventures for Call of Cthulhu. You can use just the introductory rules to play these games. They do say on the back here, it'll tell you what you need to play. And this says, armed with a pencil, some role-playing dice, and a copy of the Keeper Rulebook or the starter set, you are ready to brave the mist-shrouded streets of Esbury. So these are scripted adventures. You will have your different paragraphs. There are some supplements in the back. There are pre-made characters that you can use for each adventure. You can find PDFs of these online, so you do not have to recreate them. But this one here, Alone Against the Tide, this would be another kind of starter adventure similar to book 1 here, Alone Against the Flames. Because Alone Against the Tide, the beginning of this adventure actually does walk you through the steps of creating a character. You can skip that if you want to. If you already have a character you want to play, or you want to play one of the pre-made characters that is provided in the book, and you already know the rules, then you can skip the character creation introductory scenario here. But if you are kind of just getting into the game, you might want to buy Alone Against the Tide along with your starter set. And those two things together should provide you with maybe like a dozen hours of gameplay, because you can play through these 2 or 3 times before you see everything. These are just kind of advanced fighting fantasy books. There are things where you will discover secrets and you will have to remember and write down certain things, and then you can add so like if 90 said, hey, if you met this guy last night who told you to go somewhere, add 10 to this paragraph. So then you could turn to paragraph 100 to see if it makes sense, to see if it's the right paragraph. So there are things like that. There are some keywords. So there are ways that these remember things for you. So they are a little more on the advanced side. I don't think they're quite as advanced as something like Fabled Lands. I think Fabled Lands is kind of like one more step towards an advanced choose your own adventure. And these are kind of like right in the middle, more advanced than Fighting Fantasy, more advanced than Lone Wolf, but not quite Fabled Lands. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to reading these. I have not yet read Alone Against the Tide or Alone Against the Frost. I am looking forward to both of those. This one seems pretty epic here. This one I think is going to be a lot of fun. This seems really cool and lots of adventure, and I like the setting. I love that cover. Very cool. This is Alone Against the Frost is a solo horror adventure for one player set during a research expedition to Canada's Northwest Territories during the 1920s. Here, you choose your own path as you navigate through the story. Your choices will determine whether you find success or failure. You take on the role of Dr. L.C. Nettleman, an anthropologist from the renowned Miskatonic University in Arkham, Massachusetts. Accompanied by 3 of your most gifted and practical graduate students, as well as an experienced local guide, you set off into the fabled valley of the North Hanana in search of the anthropological discovery that will make your career and bring you fame, or so you hope. Yeah, really looking forward to this one. And then I also bought Alone Against the Dark. And I've read a couple bad things about this one, that it doesn't explain some things very well. This one has a little bit more, some more advanced things that maybe just don't quite make as much sense as you would like. So this one is a little more on the bottom of the list of things I want to get into. One thing I did want to mention, though, is if you wanted to add a little bit more role-playing to one of these books, it is very, very easy to do. I'm going to give you a quick example of that. So during my gameplay, I went to a general store, and the book said I had enough money to buy a few things. So I bought an old flashlight. And later on in the book, I had the opportunity to search in a closet. But the description of the closet said that it was dark inside, and the darkness didn't have any kind of impact on the game. But it did say that it was going to be harder. It would be hard to find what I was looking for. But because I have the flashlight, the game didn't give me an option to have a flashlight. It didn't ask me, hey, do you have a light source? And if so, then turn to this page. So what I did is, because my character had a light source on his character sheet, I just gave myself advantage on the skill roll for when I was searching. So rather than just rolling, a regular percentile die against my spot hidden, I added an additional 10s, and then I could take the lowest one. So instead of 78, which would have been a failure because my spot hidden is 70, I could take a 58 and pass that test and succeed on it. So it's pretty easy for just a little bit of tweaking to add more role playing to the scripted adventure. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed taking a look at the Call of Cthulhu starter set. You will be seeing more of this game on the channel in the near future. And we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.